Hello, everybody. This is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age, and welcome to Super Bowl Monday. I certainly hope you all had a better day than the Kansas City Chiefs did yesterday. But of course, we're not here to break down the game. We're here to dissect the ad game. And to help me do that today, I want to welcome on screen a few of my colleagues from Ad Age. Creativity editor, Tim Nudd, our senior creativity reporter, Sabrina Sanchez, and our marketing reporter Erika Wheless. Hello, everyone. How you hanging in?
Good.
Not too bad, EJ.
Not bad.
So,
how are you?
Good. We've all been sort of reading the hot takes that are out there. Everybody's got an opinion on advertising normally, and they, of course, do on Super Bowl Monday. Everybody's weighing in, but you guys have been looking at these ads for weeks, if not months, kind of expecting what's coming. And let's kind of work through some of this stuff and give folks our opinion and a little bit behind the scenes. And I want to start off on some positives. Let's talk a little bit about what worked. Tim, you published our annual Super Bowl ad review. You literally dissected every single ad that aired, and everyone can find your top 10 or top 5 ranking on Ad Age that we posted today. One of your top spots was Nike's So Win. So let's watch that one first, and then we can talk about it.
You can't be demanding. You can't be relentless. You can't put yourself first. So, put yourself first. You can't be confident. So be confident. You can't challenge. So challenge. You can't dominate. So dominate. You can't flex. So flex. You can't fill a stadium. So fill that stadium. You can't be emotional. So be emotional. You can't take credit. You can't speak up. You can't be so ambitious. You can't break records. You can't have any fun. You can't make demands. You can't keep score. You can't stand out. Whatever you do, you can't win. So win.
So this was a big deal. Nike's first Super Bowl ad since 1998 came from Wieden and Kennedy, of course. Tim, what did you like about this one?
I liked everything about this one. So, 27 years later, they come back to the game, and I mean, it was worth the wait. I think everything about this ad is incredible. The writing has a real cool kind of rhythm to it. The visuals are incredible too. Kim Gehrig of Some Such, the director, created the spot visually. It's inspiring, but it's also a wink. Like there's those scenes where the athletes are sort of, giving, like, I don't know, they're sort of laughing at what's being said. So it's not overly serious. It's got amazing visuals, and women's sports is an incredible story right now, and it's great to see Nike support these women athletes in a way that's like just super creative and super fun to watch.
I want to remind everyone out there watching too to send us your questions, and we'll get to as many of those as possible. Sabrina, I know you actually spent a lot of time reporting on this ad as well. What were some of your insights, or what did you like about this spot?
Yeah, I mean, I actually went to the screening of the spot, and I filmed a little behind the scenes video, which is on Ad Age's Instagram. But, I think from the moment that I saw it, visually, it was just striking. It's a black and white ad, which is definitely different from the very loud, colorful ads that we see in the Super Bowl. It had a very pointed message, right? I think immediately, you notice that all of the athletes in the spot are women, and you kind of hear like these statements of all these things that they can't do. And I just loved how much attitude the athletes had. I think Nike has never shied away from controversy. And so it's interesting that they portrayed how these athletes respond to this kind of criticism and naysaying that they often face. And then, of course, at the end, it shows them winning and doing exactly the things that they're told that they can't do. And I think that message of empowerment comes at a really important time, especially, with the current climate that we're in, and, just kind of elevating women in sports. So, yeah, I love this ad. This one was my favorite too.
I personally loved the song choice in this one. Very unexpected. Like if you had told me coming into this ad, and you would told me who was in the ad, I don't think I would have guessed a Led Zeppelin song, but it was brilliant. It just unexpected, and just the way the visuals were timed to some of those transitions, I thought was great.
And
I
one of the
also
things-
like too that it had I know that there's a t-shirt that you can buy that has like it's a Just Do It, and it has like an image of all of the women on there. So
Right.
if anybody had like one of the Everybody Watches Women's Sports t-shirts, you now have your follow-up t-shirt for it because they made a shirt to go with the ad.
And Dochi did the voiceover, which also has like a lot of character to it. It's not your typical voiceover, and I thought that worked really well too.
All right, so let's move along to some of the other spots you liked, Tim, and we can kind of show these on the screen as we talk about them. I think your only other 5-star ranking this year was Google's Dream Job ad. What did you like about this one?
Yeah, I like this one. You know, Google does heartfelt advertising pretty much every Super Bowl, and when it's well done, I think it can really break through. This spot promoted the Gemini AI, very different spot than what OpenAI did with. OpenAI's spot was really just like, our product is like the future of humanity. This was way more like humanizing the tech. And it was just a really, really adorable story, which Google's great at.
I think every father out there, me included, can relate, and mothers too, of course, can relate to the one more book bargaining at nighttime as well. That was a great touch, I felt.
For sure. And the moment at the end, which we're kind of seeing now, of the hug, and then it goes back in time to when she was a child. I mean, it was super emotional.
The blue sleeve is like her wearing blue as a child. And then currently, to me, that was the most striking visual. That was a great like visual thread throughout that last bit, is her little blue sleeve.
This one was created in-house too, right? That's
created in-house, directed by Henry Alex Rubin over at Smuggler, who does this kind of work better than anyone, honestly.
So the Nike and Google, obviously kind of emotional ads. We did have a wittier ad from homes.com that you liked as well. Tim, what did you like about this one?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if these broke through as much as I thought they were going to, but I felt like these were super well written. The whole idea, you guys probably remember last year's homes.com spots. They were really kind of splashy and hectic. Like it's Dan and Heidi kind of, zooming around on a helicopter all around the country. There's so much going on. This was just the two of them sitting with a lawyer in a conference room debating whether they can say the line, homes.com is the best in an ad or not. And the fact that they were debating it it was a really funny dialogue, I thought. And then the fact that they say that line like 20 times over the course of 2 ads was pretty clever. Morgan Freeman had a pretty funny cameo, a celebrity that I thought fit this concept really well. It wasn't just sort of a random celeb to throw in. So yeah, as far as just the craft of the writing, I thought this campaign was great.
Sort of speaks to, I mean, when I'm listening to you contrast last year with this year with homes.com, it sort of speaks to the idea of keeping things simple, right? In this game, I think there's a temptation to squeeze a lot into an ad, whether it's a plot with plot points and plot twists or all kinds of visuals. But I feel like that's a lesson we talk about every year, but still brands aren't always learning that lesson. Why do you think that is?
And you understand the urge to go bigger on the Super Bowl. I think a really good example this year was Uber Eats, which is the campaign, the food is for football campaign that Special US did. I know a lot of folks liked that ad last night. I think it's a good ad, but I almost prefer the previous ads in that series, which are more dialogue driven, aren't as cartoony. So I think, there's a natural inclination to kind of go big on the Super Bowl. And I think sometimes it's too much. We were talking before we came on about how when you're actually watching these ads during the game, it is so much. And like some of these ads that slow down a bit and let the creative breathe a little bit can be, I think, more effective.
So yeah, that's kind of a nice launching off point for us to talk about some other things that didn't work. Overall, I think the game, and this is not just us saying this, if you read across the board, the consensus is this is not the kind of Super Bowl where we're going to be talking about the ads for years to come. Maybe the Nike ad, maybe a couple others, but beyond that, a lot of sameness to it, a lot of celebrities, punchlines, sight gags. I think, Tim, last year you actually gave out 7 5 stars compared to only 2 this year. ad meter, USA Today ad meter, which of course, I mean, is a lot of what a lot of people look to when you're kind of gauging the overall general public sentiment. I think their overall scoring this year showed a decline. Why do you guys think that is? And I think, Erika, a lot of these kind of sillier punchline ads came from a lot of food brands, including Coffee Mate's dancing tongue ad. We can put that one on the screen, I think. But Erika, you covered a lot of these sillier spots. What's your take?
Yeah, I don't know what it was about food brands and being kind of weird. I'm just going to say it. I was not a fan of the Coffee Mate spot. Maybe I'm not the target audience, although it is very interesting to hear that they had auditions for tongue dancers, people who had the most extra tongue. Do with that what you will. For some reason, yes, less absurdist humor did like this was the tactic that many of them took. As you can see it here in the Coffee Mate ad, they had a Shania Twain song to it. Another one that I know stopped a couple of people in my watch party was the Totino's pizza rolls, and Chasmo leaving gets his head slammed, which was something. That was definitely like a stop and gasp moment. I had that as well the first time I saw it. And yeah, another one I think just kind of being weird was the Mountain Dew ad, a seal as a seal, and him singing about it. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess the thought was weird will stand out.
Sabrina, I know you've spent some time talking to Gen Z about these ads. Do you think a lot of these are trying to mimic what's happening on TikTok with, we've written about the whole absurdist humor trend that's sort of bubbling up. Does that translate, though, to a big TV ad and a spectacle like the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were definitely attempts, right, to kind of mimic that absurdist humor and what we like to call like dank memes, right? Kind of just chaotic, thrown together different elements and like caricatures. But I'm not sure it translated as well onto the big screen. I think to Erika's point, a lot of the ads were what Gen Z would just call weird, right? The Mountain Dew one, obviously the Coffee Mate one, which will give me nightmares. But there was a lot of just also repetition. There was like a weird kind of trend of facial hair going on. And I think Gen Z didn't respond as well to that. And we're actually about to publish the Gen Z Ad Age survey where we actually surveyed some Gen Zers to talk about this. And their comments were interesting. I will say that. But I will say there have been some interesting kind of like jumping off points for some of these ads. For example, Pringles and Little Caesars had very similar ads, right? So Little Caesars had like flying eyebrows and Pringles had a flying mustache, both of which, we would qualify as weird, but they actually ended up taking that, happy coincidence and posting something on Instagram a couple of hours later, actually, where, there we have it. Basically, they're going to collab. So they're teasing a collab. And there's a chance that they might work together to bring flying facial hair to hopefully a Little Caesars or a shelf near you. So, yeah.
Maybe that they can get together with all those alien ads and there can be some sort of flying hair alien mashup.
Exactly.
I think humor and comedy speaks to playing it safe, right? I mean, there are, of course, ways to get in trouble when you're trying to be funny too, but we didn't really see anyone push that boundary at all. Tim, why do you think so many brands, and this is not necessarily just this year, but in recent years, no one's really trying to push the boundaries in terms of what subjects they're taking on, what topics they're tackling? Why do you think that is? Obviously, the political environment has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, well, I also think it's just, it's such a costly investment to be on the Super Bowl. And I think essentially there is a formula these days. We see it in so many commercials now on the Super Bowl where, you throw 3 or 4 celebs in there and you sort of draft off their popularity. And, there's a sense that maybe that's the safer way to go, or it's less likely to offend perhaps, or the irony is that when you do that, you're probably taking the biggest risk because you're going to potentially fade into the background. I think that's what happened to, if you look at our ad review today, if you look at all the sort of 2.5, 3-star spots, there's just a lot of that stuff kind of in there that I don't think people are really ever going to talk about again. Probably weren't talking about a lot on the night either. So if you're an advertiser on the game, I think you really have to think about, how are we going to actually break through? How are we actually going to stand out from the kind of celebrity soup that we're getting so used to on this game. And it's frustrating to see so many brands still take that route. And we say this every year. It's like, we'd love to see something fresh and different. I would even point to something like, well, the Nike spot we talked about, obviously visually so different. Even like the OpenAI spot, which I know didn't do that well on the ad meter, but I thought it was just a very different, approach, and just kind of visually kind of interesting and broke through. What Rocket did, where they tried to get the, whether or not it worked with the sing along in the stadium following their spot. Like, I think you have to hand it to these brands that are at least trying something different, because what everybody does, 90% of the brands kind of do the same stuff. So I would like to, kudos to those who try something new.
We have the OpenAI spot. I think, since you brought it up, let's play that one now if we can, and we can talk about that one.
Live on the TV, Mom. That's one small step for...
Summarize this article. Help me practice asking for a raise.
Act as my sleep coach.
What bird is this?
Actúa como mi tutor.
Turn my idea into a business plan.
What do you want to create next?
So no celebrities in that one, unless I think that's Tom Brokaw. Am I right?
You're probably right.
I'm wondering, is he getting paid for that?
Yeah.
We can look into that later. But
Yeah.
What this one definitely popped when it came on the screen on your TV. It looked a lot different than when we were kind of watching it on our smaller screens. Who wants to talk about this one? And I don't know if Erika, Sabrina, and sounds like you guys were at some watch parties. How was this one received by the folks you were with?
There was kind of like a pause, because you're right. The black and white is very striking. I really liked so visually I did really like it, but it took a couple of people. They had to show ChatGPT at the end. I think even if they had just showed the OpenAI symbol, people would have been unsure. But when we finally hit that, people were like, oh, okay. So it caught interest, but I don't know. I have seen some commentary too of folks being like, this did not explain what your product did. Yeah. So visually very cool, but what do you do kind of thing? I know that, AI and ChatGPT have been very, very popular buzzwords lately. But yes, a lot of it caught interest, but people were like, oh, they had to see that to know what it was.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, at my Super Bowl watch party, it was very minimalist, right? So it kind of just like stopped you in your tracks, kind of like what we're talking about before. Like, a lot of this stuff is very splashy, kind of weird. So this was different, and it definitely grabbed people's attention. But there was a little bit of like, well, what is this actually about? I don't totally follow. And it felt very like futuristic and techy. So it made sense that it was for ChatGPT, OpenAI at the end. But I mean, to Tim's point, though, it is a little bit riskier, right? This is kind of the Super Bowl where, surprisingly, I think most brands stayed away from AI. And so this is kind of just putting it on a center stage. And it definitely had an impact. People were talking about it. Good or bad?
Well, I think also you could say about this is a really big kind of statement piece from this company, right? It's not what Google did with their storytelling. It's like, wow, like ChatGPT. I mean, it's not a humble ad at all. Made by Accenture Song, by the way. It's really like, here we are. AI is our future. We're going to show you the entire arc of human history, and we're sort of the inheritors of that. And our company and product is going to take us into the future. So, I mean, the Super Bowl is an interesting place for that message, right? Like, it's the biggest stage for sort of the biggest message that they're going to bring. So I thought it was really well crafted. I understand folks that maybe think it was a little confusing, but it's just nice to see something, crafted in a different way on the game.
Yeah, there's a great case study you could do comparing and contrasting this to the Google spot we watched earlier. Much different approach when it comes to AI. I like to say those kind of dots versus dad, right?
Right.
For sure. By the way, Garrett said something funny to me today that he wanted the celebrity in this spot to be Vesuvian Man, the Da Vinci Da Vinci guy, which cracked me up.
On to a little bit more of a serious topic. Ad Age, for the fourth consecutive year this year, asked every Super Bowl advertiser with plans to air national in-game commercials about how they prioritize diversity and inclusion. And we only got 14 of 58 brands with in-game spots to respond to our survey. And many of the brands that did respond simply made blanket statements about supporting diversity efforts without identifying any kind of specific strategies or data. And that compares to 23 responses we got last year. This obviously comes during a time when DEI has been sort of a major part of the conversation, the political conversation. You know, we don't have to get into all of that, but I do want to speak about this year's crop of ads. I believe at last count, there were only 4 directors who were people of color. Tim, what do you think's going on here? Why, first of all, why aren't we seeing more diversity in
Well, yeah, this is something, Ad Age has been tracking for a number of years now. And, speaking of the talent behind the camera in particular, directors, there's just a very small pool of people of color that are making these spots. And yeah, it's to me, it's disappointing. I know that there's a backlash against DEI at across the brand world at the moment. But to me, it's just an ongoing story of brands are sort of sticking with what they know. Again, it plays into the safe conversation, which is if we're making a Super Bowl commercial, we have to hire directors who've made Super Bowl commercials in the past versus seeking out fresh voices, which I think is really a shame. Maybe Sabrina, I know you covered the NFL spot that Savannah Leaf directed. The NFL, by the way, has been a leader in this area of hiring people of color to direct its spots. I thought that spots Somebody, which you covered, Sabrina, was really a great, really well-crafted piece. I wonder if you have thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting conversation, right? Because by the numbers, EJ, you mentioned we reached out to 58 brands, only 14 responded. 7 brands had spots directed by people of color, only 4 directors of color, only 1 of them was a woman. Black woman at that. So shout out to Savannah Leaf, but she did direct the NFL Somebody spot, which was their cause spot, and they do one every year. But this was a really beautiful piece of work. I think it was definitely much more toned down. It was sort of a simplistic spot, and it followed, these NFL players that work with organizations like Big Brother, Big Sister, who actually just opened a new location in New Orleans after Katrina. So they just rebuilt their location after Katrina. And it was shot in New Orleans with real kids that are part of the organization. And they're reciting this poem or these affirmations, if you will, saying, I am somebody. And this spot did a phenomenal job of making sure that they included kids of color, of different walks of life, kids with disabilities as well, and just kind of put them on the screen and had them reaffirm to themselves that I am somebody. And I think that that's such an important message, especially representing diverse people, right? Because despite the current climate, kids especially are struggling right now. This is a time when young people are facing a mental health epidemic. They're lacking self-esteem. They're feeling isolated from one another. And so, I think that was such an important message, but it was done as well as it was because it was directed by a woman of color. And I think that speaks to, who's behind the camera kind of calling the shots. And so beautifully crafted, but it's obviously kudos to the team behind it.
I wanted to talk about the halftime show. We can't talk about the Super Bowl without talking about the halftime show. And Erika, I know you watched that intently. What were some of your observations, as well as Sabrina, on sort of not only the show, but how brands were playing into the show as it was taking place?
Yeah, I mean, the show itself, we just talked about how there was quite a lack of diversity. I think Kendrick Lamar made up for a lot of that with an all-black cast. Hope everybody caught Sabrina Williams in there as well. I'm a Kendrick fan. I very much enjoyed the show. I thought it was very interesting to start with, like, the revolution will be televised. It's a reference to the revolution will not be televised. I thought he did a good job. I know they were like a little low key maybe on promoting it, but I think that's a part of how Kendrick is as a performer, is a little more low key. Very interesting to see it, more, not one of the splashiest of performances, but there were plenty of good Easter eggs, with his feud with Drake, wearing the chain that's a small A minor. Yeah, it's very entertaining if you have like at the Grammys, everybody singing this line. So it's very interesting too. I think the Super Bowl crowd is normally maybe a little bit more subdued. So it's interesting that you could also hear them singing along as well.
We were talking a little bit about this before we came on, though. Apple Music took over the sponsorship. I think last year was the first year, from Pepsi, which had a long history of doing it. And Pepsi would really market the heck out of it. They'd start advertising and teasing the halftime show, literally sometimes a couple months in advance. Apple, maybe, I don't know if low key is the right word. There's certainly some teasers that were put out and some things, but they didn't seem to go like overboard. Would you guys, Tim, do you think that worked for them this year? You don't want to like kind of over commercialize it, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's hard not to over commercialize the Super Bowl halftime show, but last year, there was Apple did a pretty splashy short film promoting last year's halftime show, and I have to chalk it up to, again, as Erika says, to Kendrick. He is more low-key performer. I'm sure Apple doesn't hesitate to do really splashy marketing for everything it produces, including the halftime show. So this was a little different. We did get some sort of mysterious teasers ahead of time, but they were very brief. And I was a little surprised too. I spoke to Apple ahead of time, and I was surprised to hear that there wasn't a ton coming.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, Apple, did they even really need to market it? Like, Kendrick was sort of the moment, right? And he kind of teed up all of this because of his beef with Drake. And so, obviously, They Not Like Us, it was the song that kind of put him on the map, led him to the Super Bowl. But there was also this anticipation leading up to it where people were wondering, is he going to perform the song, especially after the lawsuit from Drake and Universal? And so there was kind of like already this conversation buzzing. So it almost felt like Apple didn't really need to do much. And something that was interesting about this too was actually brands chimed in to the whole Drake beef, which is kind of an interesting approach for brands. Usually they stay away from controversy, they stay away from debate. And I could argue that Kendrick's performance in and of itself was like a form of protest. So it's kind of surprising that brands would chime into this conversation. Not exactly the most brand safe, if you will. But this morning we saw that Cars for Kids was taking shots at Drake with their own halftime performance. And then we also saw that Duolingo had kind of a cheeky little post on their TikTok account saying that a new Duolingo music lesson dropped and they were singing the A minor line. So kind of an interesting space for brands to chime into a rap feud.
We had a few comments from our viewers. Somebody out there thought the Harrison Ford Jeep ad was a home run. Folks, Tim, I know you didn't give it a great review. This came in the fourth quarter, probably not good luck for Jeep given the state of the game at that point. Jeep is owned by Stellantis, which was the only automaker to buy advertising in this year's game. They also had a more humorous spot for Ram. Stellantis is well known over the years for trying to make these big kind of statement type ads in the game. This ad talked a lot about freedom, but they tried to spin it in a way that is more about freedom of choice when it comes to buying cars. So we have hybrids, we have gas, we have all electric. But there were some other lines in the spot as well that could be read as trying to do one of these kind of big togetherness, we're all in this together kind of approaches. Tim, how did you think this one landed?
Yeah, I mean, we had quite a lot of debate internally at Ad Age about this one, just talking it through. I can understand how people liked it for sure. I feel like it's a 2-minute ad. It takes its time. It's a beautiful landscape. Everyone loves Harrison Ford. Like, there's a lot of positives to this ad. Where it fell down for me a little bit was just his monologue. I felt was kind of just meandering a bit. If you Olivier Francois, who kind of heads up a lot of these spots over at Stellantis, he's got a history of doing this. If you go back to the Clint Eastwood Halftime in America spot, I rewatched that this week just to get just to remind myself of really what that was about. I mean, if you go back and look at that and you look at this, it's really night and day. Like that spot was explicitly political. It was all about tying Detroit's comeback to the larger malaise in America. Even the Bruce Springsteen spot from I think 4 years ago. The writing was much tighter. It was much more willing to kind of directly address divisiveness in America. Harrison Ford's monologue here to me just felt like a little bit like kind of platitudes about freedom. Like, it wasn't really very pointed. Wasn't really sure what he was saying. And, by the end, it also conflated the product so much with what he was sort of talking about with the divide in America that there was a couple of automotive puns in there. So you didn't really know whether he was talking about the cars or he was talking about society. And, like I said, it does stand out in the game because it's quieter, because it's 2 minutes long. You can sort of settle into it as a viewer. So in that way, it probably gets attention. But I felt like it was just a little wishy-washy overall in its message.
It's interesting. I interviewed Olivier about this ad last week. And what he relayed to me on the record was that I guess Harrison's, they had presented some ideas that were coming from their agencies to Harrison Ford and his team, and they weren't loving them. They felt like it was trying to be a little bit too advertising. So this was an ad that ended up being created in-house. I think there was not much ad agency input on this one. I think they helped a little bit, but take that for what it's worth. Folks who want to read into in-house versus agency ads, of course, we mentioned the Google ad that was also in-house, which got a much better review. But overall, it would be nice to see the automotive brands come back to the game a little bit more. I think we only had 2 this year. We only had 4 last year. If you go back a few years, there was as many as 8, sometimes 11, and more often than not, I mean, automotive brands know how to do the Super Bowl. They have big marketing budgets. They've, you mentioned we were talking about the VW Force ad a while ago. That sort of broke the mold in terms of releasing ads early, and a lot of times these ads are from automakers leave a mark. So they seem to be a little bit conservative these days. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the industry around possible tariffs, the shift to EVs. I think there's just so much going on that a lot of brands didn't feel like they wanted to spend the $8 million this year. Speaking of other traditional Super Bowl categories, beer, of course, has been in the Super Bowl since the beginning of time. Anheuser-Busch actually had 4 ads this year, and Molson Coors did 1. And it was made public this morning that the Budweiser Clydesdale ad actually won the ad meter. Did that surprise anyone?
It definitely surprised me, I have to say. I know that the Clydesdales are a fan favorite, very Americana. So I can understand why it's sort of like Gen Pop and reaches a wide target audience. But it was just kind of telling almost that in the midst of all these like super chaotic ads that are like jam packing a bunch of like crazy stuff at you, the one that resonated was actually a very simple ad with a pony pushing a barrel of Budweiser. So I think it did surprise me, but mostly because I just expected maybe like the Seal to, do well, Mountain Dew. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of tells advertisers to maybe go back to basics. I don't know.
I will say among my watch group, folks did like the Bud Light one much better. They got a kick out of the guy tearing down, like when they knock down the fence, and then when she says like your mower smokes meat, and he's like, my smoker cuts grass, got like a good laugh. So among our crew, hard to beat a full, but a lot of folks thought the Bud Light ad was just funnier.
Yeah, we had a lot of internal debate about that Bud Light ad. I know, it kind of marked, and they started this last year, kind of going back to the roots with just kind of really funnier trying not to be they tried to be a little sophisticated for a while. They tried to really go hard after Gen Z. This was kind of getting back to Bud Light, just kind of delivering what people were used to for many decades in the Super Bowl. And also kind of speaking more to their core audience. Yes, Post Malone was in it, but most of the jokes were kind of dad suburban jokes, right?
Yeah, the other thing about Budweiser I thought was interesting is I think that the 60 is much stronger than the 30. And we talked a little bit about this where, brands pre-release extended versions a lot, and then they run a really short version, a 30 on the game. I wonder how many ad meter voters saw the 60, or it's actually not even a 60. I think it's like a minute and a half or something. It's a much longer spot where the emotion can build a lot more, and it's much more sort of comparable to like the puppy love ad from whenever that was, 2013 or 14, that I think also won the ad meter. Like this classic Clydesdale storytelling just works better at a longer length. And I think Budweiser actually, or at least they claimed, they weren't planning on running this nationally on the game at all until maybe their distributors saw it and thought it was great, and they sort of podied up the money for a 30. No pun intended. But yeah, I thought the 30 was, Janine and I were discussing this too. The 30 just doesn't have that much time to build the story. And maybe Bud should, if they have a good spot like this on their hands, maybe they should think about buying that 60 instead.
So, the last ad I want to talk about is the other beer ad from Coors Light. This came from Mischief. We're going to have it here on screen a little bit. And it, of course, as you can see, featured sloths. This feeds into their kind of the Coors Light chill vibe they've been trying to spread for a while now. But Tim, you interviewed the agency on this one a couple of weeks ago, got a little bit behind the scenes. What can you tell us about this spot?
Yeah, we had Marcelo on last night on the Instagram Live as well. I think the big story with this campaign is not just so much the spot. It's kind of the larger campaign where they built a lot of buzz early on. Almost a month before the game, they had that intentional typo on the Times Square billboard and in social media, in print ads. I think they misspelled refreshment and got people talking that way. And everything sort of tied into the campaign idea. I think what was interesting when talking to them is so many Super Bowl campaigns are so hyper-focused on the in-game spot. And so much of the teaser activity is either clips of the spot or riffing on the exact content that's in the spot. And I think what this campaign did kind of cleverly was create pretty interesting creative that had really nothing to do with the in-game spot. The whole sloths thing didn't come about until right before the game they pre-released. So having some ideas, having this packaging idea that was kind of separate from the spot as well, having the intentional typo, having this gag product. They had a teaser with Timothy Simons in it that was pretty separate from the in-game creative as well. So I think what Mischief did pretty well here was build kind of an ecosystem around the same theme that allowed people to interact with the idea without having it be repetitive, because none of it was sort of that connected to the in-game ad. And then again, they had a 60, I believe, that was released early. It was a 30 in the game. I think the 60 again was stronger. But yeah, as a whole, it's kind of the ecosystem of content in this campaign I found pretty interesting.
And a little secret for the PR folks out there watching, I think you have a greater chance of getting journalists to write about those ancillary things if you tell them that although it may not be as connected to the Super Bowl ad, we're going to pay a lot more attention, just to be honest.
Right.
If it ends with a Super Bowl ad, there's more of a reason for us to write about that. So I think it becomes an easier PR pitch too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to, again, thanks everyone for watching. I want to thank all my colleagues here on the screen, and those not on the screen are, writing and covering Super Bowl is a massive team effort at Ad Age, and everyone on staff contributed. So, and we are not done. We still got stories coming out today, and I'm sure throughout the rest of the week. So stay tuned to adage.com and have the good rest of your Monday, everyone. Thank you.